So welcome everybody to Wisdom Wednesdays with Jeffrey Armstrong. Jeffrey is the founder of VASA, Vedic Academy of Science and Arts. He's also the co-chairman of VFA, Vedic Friends Association, and a scholar on the British Board of Dharmic Scholars. As a yoga practitioner for the last 50 years, he retired from corporate life 23 years ago. He's been teaching full-time on behalf of the Vedic Sanatan Dharma, or yoga philosophy as many of you know it. Jeffrey's a best-selling author, philosopher, poet, Vedic astrologer. And if you go to the About section on his website, jeffreyarmstrong.com, you can learn more in his blog, you can hear his poetry, check out his YouTube channel, and the classes that he has to offer. And today's guest we're very excited about is a dear friend of ours for a very long time, Laura Plum. Laura is the founder and director of VedaWise and is the lead faculty for the Ayurvedic Integrated Nutrition 200-hour professional training. And she's also the author of one of my favorite cookbooks, which is now a bestseller, called Ayurvedic Cooking for Beginners. And it's just full of valuable information. Laura's an Ayurvedic practitioner, and she's combined her love of nurturing and cooking. So it's a beautiful illustrated cookbook with fantastic recipes on it for Vata Pitta Kapha. So we're very excited to have her here. And Jeffrey, do you want to? I'll turn it over to you. Maybe you can say a few. I know the list is long of wonderful things you can say about Laura. We absolutely adore her.
Absolutely. And thank you, Sandy. And as all of you know, Sandy and I have for that 23 years had the same vow, which is the only thing we do in life that we care to do by choice, is to teach this great Vedic wisdom and help it to go around the world and be of more service to everyone. And Laura is someone who's taken a similar vow and has dedicated her life for many, many years, and now entirely for the last several years, to sharing that wisdom. So we are certainly excited to have her with us today. And I want to begin just by setting a frame around this. So I want to put a frame around this for us all. So first of all, when we're in the midst of an emergency situation like this, it's very important we speak in the right tone of voice. And that tone of voice should come from our mutual respect for all living beings, even if we have differing viewpoints with them. That's what this is about. This means I see you as an immortal being on a long journey, and I respect the intrinsic rights and value of yourself as a being, and I honor you. And that honoring doesn't go away if on various points of life we disagree. So some of the things I'm going to say today may sound like I'm disagreeing, and I am, but in the most respectful, non-adversarial, and certainly with not an ounce of hate speech or anything like that, but rather pointing out areas of improvement. So it's very important that we have our eye out for areas of improvement. The gurus of India, of Bharat, say we could have the eyes of a fly or the eyes of a bee. The eyes of the bee are always looking for the honey. So if you start with that, everyone will feel respected, even if you disagree with them in certain ways. So I always begin with the mantra to the gurus: Guru Brahma, Guru Vishnu, Guru Devo Maheshwara, Guru Sakshat Parabrahma, Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha, which is our way of saying thank you, and remaining connected to a very long, millions of years long, if you ask some people, but at the very least, many, many thousands of years long lineage of wisdom that has been passed down as a legacy to each new generation. The difficult world that we live in right now is an uneasy mixture of cultures. And this is why I'm going to say some things that are a little critical, but they're also complementary. So the place to start is that this particular moment has brought to our attention that there is a dominant paradigm medical system in, you might call it, the Western cultures, and not all of them even, but especially in the ones with a lot of weight, and that is the allopathic medical system. The best way to think of the allopathic medical system is as emergency medicine. Anytime you have a life or death emergency, You will be so grateful to the tireless efforts of those who sew you back together, who go inside and fix your internal organs after that automobile accident. So we must have emergency medicine as an important part of our world. But for the last 100 years, other systems of ancient healing and medicine have been neglected or opposed. And this has been part of a situation also that came about when the world was colonized over the last few hundred years. And for whether it was done for good intentions, it was catastrophic for all of the indigenous people who were displaced, killed, destroyed, genocided, and in so many ways wounded. And anything that was valuable in their culture got temporarily displaced. Now, I have to say, with all due respect, that the Abrahamic religions, specifically the two, certain branches of Christianity and certain branches of Islam, decided that that was the right strategy. We can all hope that no one holds that view again, that the best way to go around the world is to colonize everyone, enslave them, rape, pillage, destroy, and then not listen to them. We're recovering from that right now. And this yogic renaissance that you see sweeping the world, like it was some kind of delightful, healthy virus, is simply you catch it when all your questions are not answered. You catch it when you're not properly embodied. So here's what I want to say about allopathic medicine. So far, and still, they're behaving as if they're the only legitimate scientific medical system. And this is simply not true. Ayurveda, Chinese medicine, various branches of those throughout the world, homeopathy, naturopathy as we now know it, chiropractic, just to mention a few, are extremely wise, extremely valuable systems of medicine. And so because our guest today is deeply involved in talking about the practices that keep us healthy, and because all of us as yogis practice our life that way, we aim not to have an emergency by neglect, negligence, malfeasance. Automobile, that's not under my control. My diet, my lifestyle, the way I live, what I eat, how I sleep, how I live in this world, how I live in this body. These are the special areas of interest of Laura, our guest, and myself, and all teachers of the Vedic cultures and the cultures that came from all of those civilizations. If we had First Nations, a shaman with us, they'd be telling us the same thing. If we had people from Chinese medicine, they'd show us how they do the same thing. So I'm going to summarize that. And that is, one method has one cure for everyone and recognizes the disease when the disease already exists and tries to stop it. That's allopathic medicine. This is why no allopathic doctors are taught diet, nutrition, or lifestyle when they go to medical school. They know nothing about that. In fact, the life expectancy of an allopathic doctor is 53 years. That's because they take such bad care of themselves, give themselves to everyone, bless their hearts. And so on one hand, they're noble, and their early death is unnecessary and not exemplary for what they're doing. Physician, heal thyself. Don't just give me medicine. Don't just claim I have a disease and then give me a one-cure-fits-all medicine, but rather treat me as an individual, show me how to live in a healthy way. And this is what we are now going to say just a little bit louder and more often after this coronavirus. We're all going to stand up a little more and say, no, you can't make one vaccine to cure everything. No, you can't make that mandatory and that alone. And no, you're not the only science paradigm. In fact, these other paradigms need to be brought forward, legitimized, paid for properly by the resources dedicated to people's health and well-being. And our entire civilizations need to change their lifestyle to a healthier one. And with that, I introduce you to Laura Plum.
Thank you, Jeffrey. You've said so much there. At first, I'd just like to really thank you as one of my great and most inspired and inspiring teachers. I want to really thank all of our teachers, all the teachers who have brought forth the Vedas, and to all of India and the people of India who have been the treasure keepers for these millennia. It's such a great blessing to be part of the stream. And as I listen to you speak, I'm almost overwhelmed with emotion at how fortunate I've been to have met you and Sandi at all, and to be able to, hopefully in some way contribute to the well-being of people in my community, thanks to these great Vedic sciences.
I think we've known you about 20 years now, at least.
Well, when you said that it's 23 years ago that Jeffrey left corporate, I was thinking I met you 5 years later. So It's been 18 years now.
Yeah,
18 years. And Jeffrey, you're really such an important teacher of mine, especially because I didn't even know about Jyotish until I met you. You've been a great teacher of the Devis and, the Shakti of the Devis. You've been a great teacher of Vedanta. You've been a great teacher of, as you know, so much. We could go on here. But as you're speaking about Ayurveda, I just was thinking a couple of things you were saying about the allopathic versus these more natural systems. The other thing that I think is very important for us to bear in mind is that the allopathic medicine is seeking to an external solution. And what they're forgetting, or what they're not necessarily celebrating, that we seek to celebrate through Ayurveda, is that the healing power comes from within. That it isn't an herb that heals you. It's not the doctor that heals you. It's you that heals you. And all that we're ever seeking to do is to stimulate, to re-stimulate, and re-strengthen those healing powers within you. So that, I think, is so honoring and empowering. And I think that's a major difference. If with allopathic, we're always looking outside of ourselves for the next solution, then we're always hungry. We're always looking for the next thing. And then the next virus gets created, and then we've got to find the next thing, right? Ayurveda is reminding you that you have this capacity to live in harmony with nature. And when we restore harmony with nature, ourselves being part of nature, then we can have ease and comfort, wellness and wholeness. And to me, that's what this is reminding. That's what this period of time is about. We got into adharmic living. We need to restore dharmic living, and primarily harmony with ourselves and with nature and the laws of nature.
Indeed.
Very beautifully said. And thank you for the kind words as well. This dilemma is something that most of us encountered very sincerely just by asking questions. If you've ever paid attention to this, if you go to the allopathic physician, what you see quickly is that they're not looking at you, they're looking at the imbalance. And they're not going to tell you how to live differently. They're going to tell you what to take. And so in a very real sense, you're almost not there. Whereas if you've ever been, so I'll tell you a lovely story, that we had a dear friend who was an Ayurvedic doctor. Sandi and I went to dinner with he and his wife. When we first met, they invited us over. And while the ladies were talking and the dinner was being prepared by our hostess, the doctor and I were chatting philosophically, and he said, "Hey, would you like me to do your pulses and tell you at what age you had all your childhood diseases?" And I said, "Yes, of course." He put his hand on my wrist and said, "Well, you were 8 when you had the mumps, and chicken pox was at 12, and this was at this, and that was that, and measles was then. Is that right?" And I said, "Yes, precisely. And you have moon in Cancer, don't you?" And he said, "Yes, I do." We were both diagnosing each other with the lifestyle practices of Ayurvedic medicine, Jyotish, Vedic astrology, with the keenly developed intuition that comes from looking at the energetic field in which the person is living, and being able to describe that and put names on that and show that you see subtle things which are not obvious to everyone. And so, Laura, you want to continue that a little bit, that thread?
Well, to me, that gets back to what you said about how we look, how we see. Do we have the eyes of the fly or the eyes of the bee? My brother yesterday became a beekeeper, so we've been talking about bees yesterday and today. We've been talking a lot about bees. And, you know, it's about the powers of discernment. You know, I'll say it's the yoga of Ayurveda, right? So we cultivate the powers of discernment to really pay attention, to see intuitively, but to really see clearly and sharply with all five senses. But to be looking for the honey. And this is an important distinction. I find in Ayurveda, with the Vaidyas, the doctors I know, the depths of compassion that I find in Ayurveda and amongst the community is really potent and really affirming. We're not looking to say, here's, just as you said, here's what's wrong with you. And I always like to say, please never use these divine names in vain. Please don't ever use Ayurveda in that way, because these sciences were not given to us in order that we would self-flagellate ourselves with them. So we can't say, oh my God, I'm so terribly Vata today. No, actually, these are beautiful ways of understanding what's going on and how to restore balance, how to lovingly, compassionately see one another and help heal and restore wholeness. So I just love what you said.
I think that's a nice paradigm that Jeffrey taught. Like, I'm not very much into astrology per se. I'm sort of a very practical girl. So if it doesn't work, as they say, when the rubber hits the streets, it just doesn't work. It's too airy-fairy for me. But the way he taught us Ayurveda was to actually see the elements in a person, and you can actually understand just by hearing their voice, looking at their body structure, if they're Vata, Pitta, or Kapha. And even that self-diagnosis is so important, to actually see it rather than having it abstract. And that way you can incorporate it into your daily life. You monitor yourself for health daily. You know, how's my Vata today? Am I doing too much Kapha? Am I over Pitta today? Is it a Pitta day? So all of these things I find so empowering in Ayurveda, whereas I don't have to go to the doctor and say, tell me what's wrong. I can maintain balance daily. And giving you another plug for your cookbook. That's why I love your cookbook so much. Because once you self-identify, you can say, okay, I'm out of balance in this area. What should I be eating today?
Right, Jeffrey.
Since this is a different scientific paradigm, I'm sure most of you are somewhat familiar with it. Just to restate it, it should be, shall I say, see-spot run. It should be as simple, so simple that a child of any reasonable age could understand it, that the world around us is made out of the solid stuff, or earth, the liquid stuff, or water, the burning stuff, or fire, or burning force, and then the subtle stuff that you can touch but not see, air, and then the really subtle stuff that's everywhere, and we see it and experience it as space. So Ayurveda appears to be too simple, and complicated minds want to run right past it. But in fact, its simplicity is its universality. It is therefore true that anywhere you go on planet Earth, you can describe yourself, the food, the climate, and what's happening in terms of those five elements and their predictable effects when they mix together with each other and mix inside of a unique body. So something quite amazing happened a couple of years ago, just a couple of years ago, during the Genome Project. But before that, the way this occurred for me is I became a Vedic astrologer, and I was not really an Ayurvedic practitioner at that time, rather a yogi and practitioner of the Vedic knowledge. But I knew enough about Ayurvedic medicine to know that the first thing you should know when you look at someone is the general outline of their body type, because they're wearing it. If I said, what color blouse is Laura wearing, it shouldn't be difficult for you to answer if you can see. Therefore, if we look at someone, something, we should make a pretty good guess which of the elements, earth, water, fire, air, and space, are predominant. So when I learned Jyotish, instead of getting lost in the details, I gave a task to myself. I said, okay, if this is true as a science, then the horoscope is a blueprint and the body is the machine. In that case, I should be able to look at the blueprint and predict the body type of the machine.
Which I found absolutely unbelievable when I first heard it. Show me.
And so the first book that Sandi and I wrote together, I, the content specialist, knowing how to do this, and she, my social conscience, because I would have been a bit in the lofty Himalayas without her bringing it down to where people live. So as a great symbiosis, that book, God, Goddess, the Astrologer, emerged with the premise that the body type must be visible in the horoscope, and the person's wearing their horoscope if you know how to look at it.
I love that. I love that book. And then you followed up with the card deck, right? And that has
Yes.
Yeah, Rochelle helped us with that book because that was such a good learning tool for people who wanted to blend Ayurveda and Jyotish together, and at a very basic understanding. But so many astrologers right now just go to the details and they don't have the basic understanding of the body type. And I think you mentioned in the last talk on karma that in the Bhagavad Gita it says we are all riding on a yantra, and that yantra is your horoscope this lifetime.
Amen. Absolutely.
So you want to comment a little bit more on that?
Well, I thought,
I know you're a wonderful Jyotish now.
I'm glad that Andrew is putting the name of the book in the chat box. It's an important book and it's a beautiful book. This is something that I'll say often to my clients. You know, this chart, your natal chart, is a yantra, and you can use it to meditate upon. It reminds me of that story, whether it's true or not. It's a beautiful story about apparently in Africa, when a woman is pregnant, the community gathers around and they listen very carefully, and they'll hear the vibration of this emerging creation. And then in that vibration, they name the child according to what they're hearing. Then as the child grows, every year on the birthday, they sing that name back to that child. And then if the person as they grow ever gets lost or sad or broken or sick, they will gather around and sing the name. And they're singing the soul. They're singing that essence up to the person who's then able to remember their own essential vibration. And I think the chart is like that. You're remembering your own essential vibration, form of that. Yeah, beautiful.
The one thing about the silence that this virus has placed upon the world is that we're hearing sounds that we have not heard. It's the perfect time to meditate right now because their atmosphere isn't filled with pollution and sounds. It's just delightful in a way, the good side of it.
So just a little example of this, of how it happens in funny ways. Sandi and I were in a Starbucks 2-3 years ago, and this fellow walked in and he saw me and he said, "Oh, you're Jeffrey Armstrong." I said, "Yeah." He said, "You're a Vedic astrologer." I said, "Yeah." He said, "Guess my chart." And I looked at him for a few moments and I said, "Well."
We were just on our way to a talk, right?
I said, "Well, first of all, you're obviously Vata. There's no question about that. I can see by the way you're built and the way you're sculpted. And you couldn't be Libra anything because you're not a good dresser and your social manners are kind of
Rough.
tough and rough." So, and it looks like it could be, it's got to be double Vata. It's not just single. So that only leaves Gemini and Aquarius, and you're kind of quirky and unique. So let's call you Aquarius rising. And I would say, no, I said, let's say Aquarius moon and Gemini sun. And the rising sign is not too obvious, so it's probably one of the water or earth signs that could go both ways, but it doesn't look like it's Pitta. Grabbed his hand, no, cold hand. "Okay," he said, "that's right." Wow.
Wow.
This is something we do all the time as
Mm.
Jyotishis and Ayurvedis. What do you directly see? What does the diagram say?
Mhm.
Right, Laura?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. But I'm wondering now what you feel like is the most important thing for people in a practical way to incorporate into their life now.
Well, I think the first thing, the next story about this is that a few years ago, I started to tell it. The Genome Project was in full swing.
Mm-hmm.
And the technological cultures like India that are really good at science because it's where science came from. And Sanskrit is like a programming language. So that's why the people from India are such good scientists. In fact, in 50 years after the British left, they took over IT. And so that's quite the accomplishment from going from a supposedly primitive culture colonized by a Western culture, and then 50 years later taking over IT. So during their research, one group was working on the Genome Project, and they were seeing that particular genetic combinations create a certain enzyme in the body, and that enzyme competes with or cooperates with or facilitates a particular medicine. So they did the research and did all their numbers and got a sample size and finished with all the sample studies, all very scientific. And at the end, they came up with 3 groups. And they looked at the 3 groups and they were Vata, Pitta, and Kapha. This was the first time in history that Vata, Pitta, and Kapha were seen by genetics and by a specific enzyme in a particular genetic combination. If it had been discovered anywhere else, they wouldn't have seen the 3 body types. But because it was India, they saw it obviously. So now, technically, it's possible. If you were a Jyotishi, a geneticist, and an Ayurvedi, you could look at the horoscope, see the gene code, look at the gene code, see the horoscope, and from the middle, see both of them, and all would see the body type. This is now science in the words of the world, not 2,000 years ago. And it's remarkable. And so I think what we need to do after this pandemic calms down is all go forward and say we need to legitimize these ancient methods of healing and give them the respect they deserve in society. What do you think?
And of course, you must add that this
Absolutely.
only
You know,
works with the Vedic chart.
Yes, of course, not the
Not the
Western chart,
Western
but the
chart.
Vedic chart. That's right.
Right.
Got to get the blueprint right.
Yeah, right. Absolutely, I 100% agree. I think it's so fascinating, the science that's coming in now. There's a man named Dr. Madan, who's head of something in Ayurveda out of the UK, London. He's a genetic biologist, and he is fascinating to talk to. He talks about how the cells behave, and he can talk about DNA and the cellular, the tissue, the organs, all from that point of view of Vata, Pitta, Kapha. Everyone understands Vata, Pitta, Kapha? Everyone listening?
You want to explain it a little bit? Just
Yeah.
maybe some people don't, just quickly,
Okay.
if you can.
Well, when you talked about the 5 elements, you know, thinking about space representing potentiality, earth on the other side of that representing stability. In the middle are the very dynamic elements of air, fire, water. And air, of course, is mobility. They represent the principles of air, mobility, fire, transformation, water, cohesion. So those 3, by being so dynamic, can sometimes go out of balance. And we're looking at that with people. Air combines with space to create what we call Vata dosha. Fire with a little bit of water, Pitta dosha. Water with a bit of earth, Kapha dosha. Water and earth is Kapha. And so you can know a lot about what the doshas are just by knowing what you know intuitively about those 5 elements, right? Air moves, space is vast. Sometimes we can feel spacey or we feel restless, right? And that would be Vata related. A fire person obviously is going to be sharp, focused, clear, strong, muscular. And then a Kapha person, what happens when earth and water come together? Well, you can make mud, you can make a building, you can build a home. So it gives structure, lubrication to the body, but also kindness and patience.
If you make a couch, make it Kapha.
You can. Nice. Right. And so I just think about this yata pande tata brahmanda, in the cosmos, we can look at Jyotish and see this cosmic view, but then we can look down all the way into the cell and we still see those forces of electromagnetic energy, thermodynamics, and gravity, which is vata, pitta, kapha, right? At the largest sense, then brought into the most finite sense. And I love that. I love the vision of the great sages once upon a time, who with their own eyes and their own five senses and their own intuitive powers were able to cognize what we cannot see with the naked eye.
Yeah.
They didn't have telescopes, magnoscopes, microscopes, and yet they knew all this.
I always get a chuckle when say science proves that meditation changes your DNA, and I'm thinking, yeah, the yogis knew that 5,000 years ago. I'm glad you're finally catching up.
Yeah. So does trying it, in case you doubt yourself. One of the persons everyone could listen to after we're done here is a lady named Vandana Shiva.
Oh, yeah.
I love her.
You've interviewed her. I think I saw that on YouTube. She's one of our favorite ladies.
She's remarkable because she is the representative, I would say, if there was a single representative of Mother Earth, Mata Bhumi, as she's called in Sanskrit, it would be Vandana Shiva. She's given her entire life, and she's so scientific and brilliant, but so compassionate and heartfelt. She's everything a mother should be, and everything a warrior should be, and everything a scholar should be. Integrous, respectful. And what she's looked at is the assault upon the seeds that become the food we eat, and how Monsanto and other companies that were making military-grade poisons for killing people didn't want to lose their business and transferred over to making civilian-grade poisons for killing bugs, changing food, warping the pattern and genetic code of plants, and have contributed mightily to destroying agriculture in India, which is greatly threatened by this right now. So part of this seminar on this Wisdom Wednesday is that both Laura and I, and many people like us, are now voices for a bottom-up, up-down agriculture system that is organic, that is original, that uses original seed stocks, that uses proper fertilizers, that moves all the way up and down the food chain, life chain, with healthy ingredients and healthy things. And this is the new awareness that I know Laura is promoting greatly. So Laura, you want to chat on that a bit?
Well, I think that, if I could speak to two great heroic teachers of mine, you are one, and Vandana Shiva, Dr. Shiva is another. I don't know if everyone's familiar with her. She's a nuclear physicist. She's a great mind. She studied, I think, in Bangalore, and then went to Canada for her PhD, where she studied. She grew up in the Dehradun, in the forests of the lower Himalayas and the upper plains, and her father was a forester. So she grew up walking those beautiful Himalayan forests and meeting, sages and yogis as a child. And so then when she went to Delhi to work with the government to help develop the Green Revolution, she saw that while what India was trying to do was to make their farms, to grow the yield, because obviously India has a lot of people and they needed to be able to feed everyone. So they were seeking to grow the yield. What happened, though, was that it ended up bringing in banking. Banking was supporting the loans that were supporting the buying of more agro-business, right? And what she saw was it was creating deaths, suicides, violence, and in various parts, and it was, in her opinion, not working. So she went home. It's a beautiful story. She went home and she went door to the villagers, to the people who live, way up at the top of a path, a little trail she had to hike, these lower Himalayas. But she went door to door and said, "Do you have original seed?" And she started the first seed bank, and she's got a seed bank now in every state in India. And she also has what I might refer to as just a sort of display farm outside of Dehradun in northern India, where you can go, and she shows that you can produce great yield through companion planting.
Yes.
Right? Through really generative farming, and which is basically what she's trying to show the farmers of India is these are our old ways. Let's remember our ways. this great heritage of India is something to be marveled at. And so she's just, again, helping people to remember the great sacred ways where they are able to produce the yield that is more or less on par with what they're able to do with the agro business. Very, very fascinating. But just one thing to say about that, because it does come back to Ayurveda, where she said, I said, after spending 3 days with her not too long ago, and I was interviewing her through that, I said, you know, you've talked about so many different things. How can we bring it home for people? What's the one thing that the people watching these videos, what's the one thing that everyone can do? And she said, your own 2 hands. She said, when you cook your meals, you use your own 2 hands. And your own 2 hands are creative, generative, and full of love. Cook your own meals, because then you make your own choices about where your food comes from. You help your local farmers, you help your organic farmers, and you feed yourself. And she just made this beautiful comparison about how each meal you make for yourself is self-care promoting world care.
I'd like to add to that.
Marvelous.
I wanted to add to that too, is that here in the West, we now have this concept of open kitchen. And everybody comes in and they talk around while somebody is preparing food. And this in yoga perspective and the gunas, you eat what you, or you digest what is coming in, or you do or you don't digest. So if you're coming into the kitchen and you're spewing your day's problems, that all goes into the food. Whereas I know in India, most of the kitchens are separate, and the person cooking is chanting mantras over the food. There's no disruption to the food. It's a sacred act. Whereas in the West here, it's just a social melee of everything going into the food. So the one thing you can do is cook your own food and also consider it a sacred act and stop the gossip in the kitchen.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's another historical moment that most people don't know about, someone named J.J. Rodale. And J.J. Rodale wrote the first magazine on vegetarianism. And he was influenced by a British couple who went to India in the 1840s or so, thinking they would go do some good to the poor savages and teach them agriculture. So they went to India, and what they found, of course, when they got there was the most sophisticated agriculture system in the world. And they got over their arrogance immediately and learned it. And so what we call organic farming was not a legacy from Europe. It was a legacy from the British couple that went and studied it in India. And J.J. Rodale, the first vegetarian advocate back before the 60s and the 50s, this movement of understanding we were missing something unfolded through some of these great thinkers. So I want to switch the channel just a tad by telling a fun story that one of my Ayurveda teachers taught me, that there was a older Ayurvedic doctor who was retiring, and he drove to town, to the train station in a buggy with a horse-drawn buggy to pick him up and take him out to the village. It was a remote village where this young man coming out of modern Ayurvedic school was going to take over his practice. And as they got about 3/4 of the way there, they crossed a large lemon orchard. And the young man got a very glum, dour look on his face. And the older doctor noticed and said, "What is wrong?" He said, "Oh, I am so sad." He said, "Why is that?" "Because there is a lemon orchard here. No one will ever get sick." And the older doctor said, "That's okay. They don't know not to eat the seeds." So, this is the sophistication we have not been given. And I want to hand it back to you to give some people an idea of how you're reintroducing this into modern lifestyle in a doable way. Because the sophistication is now for us to understand our relationship to the doshas, our relationship to the seasons, our relationship to our family, to each other, and everyone in our family eats differently. And we now have to make this into a lifestyle. And I would say one of the things I know you're brilliantly doing is you're bringing it to that level.
I think too, Laura has a questionnaire on your website, right, to determine a person's body type that they can go in and do.
Right, you can go there, and if you just go to the homepage, Laura Plum, and scroll down, you'll find that free.
Right. So if you don't know what your dosha is, do that first, and then if you want to learn how to balance your dosha, call Laura.
Right, but then promise us that you won't ever use what you learn against yourself, that you'll only use it lovingly to help restore balance and wholeness. Because these, again, and really there's more, people are often more than just a Vata Pitta Kapha. They might be a Vata Pitta, they might be a Pitta Kapha, they might be a Vata Kapha, or even a Vata Pitta Kapha. So there's 7 potentials. And actually at Ayurvedic clinics where I've interned in India, they look more at the gunas or the attributes. And I don't mean by that sattva, tamas, rajas, but I mean more, is this person heavy, cold, rough, smooth? You know, what is actually happening within the body in terms of those attributes, those 20 attributes or the 10 pairs of opposites. So thank you. Yeah.
You want to tell us a little bit about something? I'll introduce it.
Yes, please.
One of, I think, the most important topics. I like to use the metaphor that if you had a Lamborghini and you were driving it across country and it broke down somewhere in deep south in Georgia, and you went to Clem Cadiddle Hopper's garage because it was, you know, a mile from where you were, and you got towed there, and you said, I think there's something wrong with my car. And Clem said, well, you know, I can take care of it. He says, really? He says, you've worked on Lamborghinis? No, he says, a car is a car. Would you let him work on your car? No, not if it was a Lamborghini. You would know that a car is not a car. But let's use the car for a moment as a metaphor, since in Sanskrit, this physical body of 5 elements is called the karana. It is the automobile. Auto means the self, and mobile means the thing we get around in. So this is my automobile, and I'm driving it here and driving it there, but I can't get no, oh wait, that's a different song. I'm going here and I'm going there in my vehicle, but what I want to know is, how do I adapt to changing circumstances?
Well, what I'm also hearing as you tell the story of the Lamborghini is that if we think of sattva, rajas, tamas, and maybe the Lamborghini, I don't know if that could be compared, but maybe that's the more sophisticated, more complex. Okay, the sattvic one, and the one driving it knows, so they've got that bigger picture of the whole variety of potential cars and automobiles. But the one who's saying, no, I can fix it because a car is a car, maybe that's a more narrow viewpoint, right? And so to that person, a car is a car. And that's what I love about Ayurveda, is that I think it does really, so this is the yoga of Ayurveda, for me at least, is the helping us to see more clearly, to see more subtly, and to see more expansively. It's really yoga off the mat and into our daily life. Yoga maybe helps us to look at the nature of reality, and Ayurveda helps us look at the reality of nature. And so they're the inside out of each other. And while we might say Ayurveda is really sort of, yoga is what's in here, Ayurveda is what's out there, and how we work with what's out there, I think it's that key word that you just used, is relationship. Because really all of life is a relationship. People say you die alone, you're born alone, but I'm like, well, at least your mother was there when you were born. At least there's that essential relationship. You come into the world at least with a mother. And, you know, if we look at how things evolve, you've got, in the beginning is the word, sound, vibration, heat, explosion, star, right? All the periodic table is formed then in the belly, the star explodes, cohesion brings things together. We have gravity, and then earth, and then earth is mostly water, and eventually the atmosphere has changed because enough green plant material comes up, and eventually animals are able to mammals come out of the marine life and come onto the earth life, and eventually, thanks to nature and its evolution, we are able to come alive. And we come alive because of that support from nature. And it's always here, with its extraordinary intelligence, and I think love, I think nature is love, the principle of love and beauty, coming through nature, to reach to us all the time, to say you are loved, you have this support here in the world around you. We aren't really alone in that sense. And then the question is, what kind of relationship do we want to have? What kind of relationship do we want to have with the trees each time we breathe? What kind of relationship do we want to have with the bounty of nature each time we sit for a meal? What kind of a relationship do we want to have with one another each time we exchange words?
I'm going to ask Jeffrey to sort of put a frame around that, in that nature requires the right tension. And could you define that word a little bit more?
Yeah, and I want to add one little piece that sort of summarizes also what Laura said. There's something so unique about Ayurveda that Western medicine has never thought about. But if Clem was a good mechanic, he would have said, well, I get what you're saying, but why don't you let me just check the oil and the water? So if you drive your car for a long time, what happens to the oil? It gets dirty. And no matter how everything else is working, if that oil is dirty, the whole engine's performance is going to be compromised. So the simple but most profound truth that allopathic medicine hasn't got a clue to, not even a clue, is that our body is a machine of sorts, biological, but a machine nonetheless. And in the course of time, it gets choked up with impurities, depending upon our rate of consumption, the environment we live in, the stresses we experience. And so there's something in Ayurveda called Pancha Karma, which I'm going to let Laura tell us a little bit about. And before I set her to that task, if I may, I'll just say that what we call relationships are all in the context of nature. And to not have a relationship with nature is suicidal to any relationship you have within nature. Therefore, in our relationship seminar, Sandi and I have integrated these Ayurvedic principles into, you might say, psychological, emotional, physical lifestyle. And we've woven in the 5 koshas of yoga so that we actually have 5 different layers of matter around us. And as we go deeper into Ayurveda, we learn how all of this is getting deconstructed and reconstructed from time to time. Sandi and I went together on a 21-day Pancha Karma to India. Remarkable experience. So Laura, will you say a little bit about this cleaning process?
Well, of course, when I heard you say Pancha Karma again, I'm hearing that word car. So we get to go and take our car to the car wash.
And I hear Pancha Karma.
Pancha Karma. But instead of an hour at the car wash, it can take 21 to 28 days. And really, so many people are trying to do the speed wash now and go get a 5-day or 7-day Pancha Karma.
We heard of stories where a yogi would go into a 60-day Pancha Karma, an older yogis, and these doctors could actually restore a new set of teeth. And restore, and that's how they were aging to 150 and 200 years old, because they
used rasayanas and other secret medicines.
Sure you've heard stories like that too in your training.
Oh, that's beautiful. That's so beautiful. Well, just that, the body's capacity for regeneration is amazing. I mean, look at, today is Earth Day, by the way. It's so beautiful that we're having this conversation on Earth Day, and
wonderful.
Pranams to Mama, to our Mother Earth. And look how regenerative she's been. I've been having friends of mine in Rishikesh have been sending me videos. The air is clear, the water is clear. All you hear is chirping birds instead of honk, honk, honk. I mean, it's so beautiful to see how regenerative our Mother Earth is. And, we are made in the image and likeness of the same creative power. And so we also have these tremendous regenerative powers. But it can take time. And what I love so much about Pancha Karma, which Pancha, of course, means 5, and Karma means these actions. There's had to be these 5 actions that are at the heart of a Pancha Karma practice or period. Not that all 5 are used on one person. It depends again on the dosha and the severity and the age of the person, etc. But what generally will happen is you'll have a week where the body is prepared. You'll have a week where you have most of the Pancha Karmas, more or less, depends on what's being done. And then a week of rejuvenation. And that's why it's so essential to have a minimum of 21 days. You can't do that in 5 days or 7 days. And it's not fair to you, I think, or the doctors, or especially the tradition. If we try to use Ayurveda allopathically, just give me the medicine, just give me the herb, then we're not going to get the best of it. It's not respectful, first and foremost, but it also isn't going to give us the power, the potency of it. And so then we will think, well, it's not as powerful as people say. And then it doesn't get to grow. So we need to be respectful. And that's that thing you just said about the accelerated pace. Our accelerated pace can create so much stress on the body and the mind. That this is all about slowing down. Pancha Karma, a lot of people say, I could never find 21 days. And I frankly don't believe that, because the minute you have 21 days, you'll say, how did I not do this sooner? Right? The minute you have this 21 days to not only have a whole 1 hour or 1.5 hours of warm oil body massage, 2 people doing it in syncopated movements, and then doctor coming to see you every day, sitting and talking to you for 30 minutes, 45 minutes. Not, okay, I have to go see my next patient in a rush, but sitting with you. You're in a beautiful setting, the nature all around you, the birds are chirping, and they don't want you on your computer, and they don't want you doing a lot of exercise. So you have a lot of time, and you cannot believe how beautifully you slow down, and what that slowing down pace does in terms of giving you back the beauty of being alive, right? It's such a feeling that ojas really comes forth.
Life
Ojas,
force.
all right? That ojas, that life force, that rejuvenative power. And it comes forth first as a feeling. You feel, wow, it feels good to be alive.
It's almost like being a baby again. So let me use a metaphor. Imagine that you hadn't had a baby before. And so as soon as the baby pooped in their diaper, you'd put perfume on them so that you couldn't smell it. And no one told you. So a week later, that diaper's getting pretty bad. Baby's crying a lot, and you're putting perfume on and spraying perfume in the room. That's called allopathic medicine.
Or Europe for most of the.
And why do you think everyone's wearing deodorants and perfumes and everything? It's because if someone smells bad, it's a symptom they need a Pancha Karma. It's a symptom that some poison's got inside of them, or that some kind of decomposition is happening inside of them. And we live in a mask it, don't talk about it culture, rather than a let's get to the bottom of these gunas. And this is where the gunas are so important. How are you removing your waste? From where? From your nostrils, from your ears, from your anus, from your genitals, from all the places they build up, from your internal body, from the organs in your body that collect the waste and then don't work as well. What else?
Well, I just am thinking about, just to kind of go back to what you told me once, not too long ago, you said something about how a Jyotish practitioner first learns Vedanta or philosophy. And I think the same is true of Ayurveda. The Ayurvedic practitioners, doctors, and teachers that I know are very sattvic people. And they understand the big picture. They understand the universal Sanatana Dharma. They understand how everything fits and moves together and flows together. They see the big picture and they live accordingly. They're not smoking a cigarette, putting it down, out and going to see a client. They're not using that language and then going to see a client. They're not cooking and complaining about their day. Right? They are often yogis or yogic practitioners, or at least they're doing some mantra, bhakti, devotional practices, and they're coming to meet their clients from that very sattvic place, which is so beautiful, because you then really feel the transmission of their heart, their healing energy coming with it. Right. So even as you speak about wastes, I'm thinking about the yogic practices that we do to cleanse not just the physical body, but the subtle body.
Which we haven't talked much about, but I like to call that, just so people can easily understand it, the dream body. And the dream body is the liaison between our immortal self, the Atma, and this external body that we're driving around in. So though we've just touched on it, what Laura just did was lead us into where yoga is going to take us, and where the yams and niyams, and where the daily practices and the dinacharya, and the how you heal yourself, and the how you remove negative emotions, how long you hold them, how you see them as symptoms, and more. Tell us, Laura.
Well, if you're speaking of the yamas and niyamas, obviously that's a good foundation for an Ayurvedic lifestyle. And then yoga to, strengthen and lighten up the body, pranayama to grow the life force within you. Pratyahara is to still have that sense of the five senses, but maybe more from an internal point of view, to cleanse and really sharpen your five senses so that they can be better used for clear and sattvic purposes in life. Dharana, when I teach Ayurveda, I always speak about how are we going to cultivate our powers of discernment, our powers of concentration. How do we cultivate awareness so that we can really learn what's beneficial, what's nourishing, and what isn't? And it doesn't mean to have to be, I hate this, or I don't like that, or that's bad. But how about this is nourishing, this is not? But how do we know unless we're really paying attention? Right?
That's the other thing too. I think unless you actually take a teacher in the departments that you're trying to learn, I think the philosophy that it's all within is undermining people searching for a proper teacher. I think you really do. It's like, as the guru says, you open my eyes, I didn't see these things. It's like the guru doesn't tell you how to think or what to think. He teaches you how to think, how to use discernment, how to see things, how to see the gunas, how to see the body types, how to learn the scriptures. They give you a pair of eyes that you can see properly and learn properly. And I think that's an important key that is missing for a lot of people. They just figure they can do it on their own.
That brings us to one more piece, and that is that the platform of all of this knowledge has to be steady, or you're so afraid and so disrupted. Just like now in the current crisis, if people lose their focus and don't have a long view, they get caught in the danger and terror of the moment, forget themselves, and you can collapse entirely, you can crash. People kill themselves in those moments. People go down and become their worst possible being. So the real first goal of yoga is to know that we're the Atma and that we're an immortal being. And then when you really know that, you send the signal of immortality to every cell in your body. And in yoga, this is called the City of Nine Gates, which we'll perhaps talk about at another time. But it simply means that we, the conscious entity, are supposed to be the mayor of this body. It is supposed to listen to us. And people don't understand. They think meditation is some kind of homework. It's actually some kind of homework. It's where you introduce yourself to every cell in your body as the one in charge. And you take control from your ancestors, from your DNA, from what's going on around you, from your entire environment, until it's just my hands out in a circle, and from the circle to my core, I am the mayor. And when you can define that circle consistently, moment to moment, day to day, awake or asleep, wake up in a dream, reassert your control as the mayor over the consciousness, the state of being, and have an integrity of being that comes from that. This is the great gift of this yogic culture. Laura?
That's so essential what you're saying, and so beautiful. And Dr. Bruce Lipton, of course, many people may know, he's a molecular biologist, and he's done a lot of scientific research on this and really extrapolates scientifically on that specifically. But also what I love to think about when I hear you say that is Ram is the governing intelligence. Sita is the nourishment of taking the blood to feed the entire body. Hanuman is the unification of these two forces. So with devotion, whether it's devotion to the breath or devotion to Krishna, with this devotion, we can reunite the governor, the mayor, right, with the transporting system. sending the signal out to the entire body that the body will become whole again. Absolutely. And that's right.
And Ravana, of course,
Right.
is all the things that cause despicable behavior,
Distraction.
unnecessary harm and fragmentation, cause destruction of the environment, destruction of each other, cause negative emotions to overpower us until we not only lose our divinity, we even lose our humanity.
Mm-hmm.
We live in a world where there are businesses who make products to do that to people that are called food.
Mm-hmm.
So eventually we have to be able to talk about those companies, their products, the intention behind them, what really is poison and really what isn't. Again, without hate speech, but from this wisdom-based caring. And I'm so glad that you not only say the word loving, but speak it in such a loving and believable way. So,
Well, ladies, I think we can vote with our dollar at the grocery store. So that's the first what can you do now or next.
Right. You know, it's so important that we do act from the heart, from our values. And at the same time, I love what you said earlier, that in this time that we're all living through, which is incredible. I was on with a client in Tahiti the other day and somebody else who's in Europe and somebody in India, and we are all in the same situation.
yeah.
So we are truly in this together. And it's so important because it does stir up our vata, right? It does stir up, we get worried or nervous, anxiety, fear. Many people have lost work or jobs or income. So of course it's going to have some vata vitiation. The important thing is that we remember that we are yogis, that we remember we have the tools to stay grounded and stay calm. Looking for ourselves outside of ourselves, looking for what is the cause of it. All of these things that people are starting to get into where they think it might be helpful. I think the most helpful thing that we can do is do our yoga, go inside, find that immortal self you speak of, find your inner calm, and be a nourishing presence for yourself, your family, and the world. Because that's what the world needs most right now. We need to find the light internally as the nodes put out the light externally.
Absolutely. And as a tease for future activity, what all yogis know is that the ultimate amrita, the ultimate medicine that is at the beginning and end of the process, is the sound vibrations of beautiful mantras that were the gifts of the rishis and sages and wisdom-based civilizations of the past, who said, these vibrations will link you to the universal resources that appear to be unavailable to you. But as soon as you know how to, like this frequency we're on, having this beautiful time together. So this darshan, this seeing each other inside and out, this is what mantras represent. And there's a wonderful story that the mantra to Shiva, the Mahamrityunjaya, Triambakam Yajamahe Sugandhim Pushtivardhanam, is the poison removing mantra which is given to apparently terminal patients. And they're told to link yourself to this notion of a healing, nurturing, caring reality that can simply act as a kind of divine yogic chemotherapy. The chemotherapy of yoga and the radiation therapy is mantra. And Laura, we're so fortunate to have you with us today. Would you summarize for just a couple of seconds and then we're finished?
Well, we'll take Q&A after this.
Okay. I just, you spoke of the malas. I just thought it'd be maybe helpful to give people something they can do if you feel that you have to release some excess waste, some buildup of ama or toxins in the body. Sip hot water throughout the day. If you want, you can add some ginger or cumin seeds or coriander and cumin seeds. So, but sipping hot water throughout the day instead of just chugging down a glass, we just want to sip all day long, at least at 15-minute intervals. And the other thing is, you can fast. You could skip dinner one night a week, or you could try to have a daily and all day, khichdi mano diet, add a little more spice to your food. These are things that will help to reduce the waste, the toxins, and of course, try to live seasonally. When Sandi said in the beginning with my book, as things were starting to get complicated, what dosha is it? What time of day is it? What season is it? What are the doshas of the time of day and the seasons? I said to the editor, how about if I just simplify it by suggesting we eat sattvically? And to eat sattvically is to eat seasonally, to eat locally, to eat organically. And right now in the Northern Hemisphere, it's spring, and so it means lots of leafy greens that also help to detoxify, purify, and lighten up. But if you're in the Southern Hemisphere where it's autumn, then this is the time to be really building ojas to strengthen your immune system to go forward. So that's more of the root vegetables and the grains and things. But consider the sipping water, consider a light fast 1 day a week, and consider adding spices to your food. Very, very simple. And go with what feels right for you. Try this. If it doesn't feel right, try something different. Because remember, you are the healer, you're the inner healer, and you're possessed with great wisdom yourself. We just have to pay attention.
Beautiful. Thanks, Laura.
Thank you, Laura.
I just wanted to mention also that we have a special guest, two special guests really that are listening in. And speaking of mantra, one of them is Karnamrita Dasi, who's on. She's been a visitor here in Vancouver and guest at our retreats. So hi Karnamrita, and thank you for listening in. If you want to hear mantras, I know she has got some wonderful selection on her website. So so soothing. I think she's got one of the most beautiful bhakti voices around.
She's a yogi, lifetime yogi, but she is classically trained, and I don't know anyone in Western civilization who can both sing and perform and knows the mechanics and the details of the science of music better than Karnamrita Dasi. So do look her up. All
right, everybody, if you have a question, turn your video on and we will see you. And if you have a question of Laura or Jeffrey. Nilesh, how are you?
Good. Can you hear me?
I can.
We can.
All right. It's a question to Laura. I mean, great discussion. Really enjoyed listening to both sides here. Somewhere Laura used the metaphor of gravity, thermodynamics, and something else that I missed to kapha, vata, and pitta. Would you elaborate on that, please?
Well, sure. I just think about the ancient sages and how they cognized this great wisdom. And ultimately they were giving us, this term from the Vedas, yata, pinde, tata, brahmande. Well, how did they know? How did they know that in the atom is the cosmos, that in the personal is the universe? How do they know as above, so below? They know by seeing, by watching, by paying attention. And as they pay attention, they understand this subtle realm, that in the subtle realm, and now our astrophysicists say the same, that underlying all of the natural world, all of existence, is electromagnetic energy. They call it the four. The thermodynamics, which also includes, heat and transformation, but also fusion, and then gravity. And really, if you think about it, if vata is movement and its principle is mobility, it's electromagnetic energy. In the body, the vata, the governing dosha, relates to the pulse, the synaptic patterns in the brain, right? It relates to the drumbeat as well as the flow. And of course, pitta relates to heat, light, transformation. That's thermodynamics. And then kapha, water, is cohesion. Water itself is the cohering of two molecules, hydrogen and oxygen. And in the water, of course, we are born from that, right? So life begins there, and it's the pulling together from the single cell, right, being to the multi-cell being. We realize that if we banded together and cooperate, we can get more done, we can be more. So that's from the principle of cohesion that relates to kapha. Really more relates to ojas, but ojas is a positive force there. So when I think of gravity, I think, what is gravity? Gravity is kapha. What is kapha? Kapha is love. So maybe this whole world, right? Maybe gravity. And think about it with an apple. Does an apple fall down? An apple, if it's on the other side of the world, it's falling up. So really an apple's falling to the center. Gravity is a centrifugal force. It's actually pulling it in towards the center. And this is what's happening. Really what kapha is doing is it's holding. Kapha is the structure. And a kapha personality holds the community, the family, the children, right? They hold us. and help us with integrity of structure, but also integrity of being. Does that make sense?
Thank you.
Yes, yes. And thank you very much. I love metaphors and I really enjoyed it. I just missed that last part, but also the great explanation that you offered. So thank you again.
Yeah,
Thanks,
thank
Nilesh.
you, Nilesh. Yeah.
Catherine, did you have a question? No? Okay. Rakesh? We're not hearing you, Rakesh. No sound from your end. There you go. Oh.
Rakesh, it sounds like you sound like a mouse. Sorry, but it does. It sounds like a little mouse running around.
Can you type your question in because we're not hearing you?
May I say something while people come to their
Yes.
question? In the notes, and thank you so much, Andrea, for putting in the notes, it says fast by itself. I want to be sure that we're not, I'm not saying to people to fast, because this is the origin of personalized medicine. We're so fortunate that Western medicine has come to, is integrated in Ayurveda. And thanks to Ayurveda now developing this concept of personalized medicine and also whole systems medicine. These two concepts come from Ayurveda. The important thing is that I don't want to just say everybody fast, because we need to look at each individual. And each individual needs to take that differently. So when I said fast, I just mean maybe you skip dinner one night a week. Maybe it's just a soup broth. Or maybe you just have khichdi for breakfast, khichdi for lunch, khichdi for dinner. So it's more of what we call a mono fast or a mono diet. Okay, I just want to be careful there, because fasting can be good for some, but not so good for others. And when we say fast, it doesn't mean don't eat anything for a week. It's
So under the guidance of a practitioner, ideally.
please, yeah.
Okay.
Which is a related word to gravity. Gravitas comes from the word guru in Sanskrit. It pulls on you because it's heavy, and it's the core that's heavy. So it's important to have knowledge in our lives, and if possible, people who are speaking that knowledge, so that we have an outside ourself reference point that acts as a centering. So sometimes the word guru is translated heavy. What they're holding is heavy. They feel the weight of it, but stabilizes us. Otherwise, we're little electrons getting blasted all over the place by everything around us. So that gravitas is very important.
Right, I have Rakesh's question now. He says, everyone has personal addictions. I don't know, but they're often pleasurable. So why are they like that? Example, alcohol. How do you deal with that?
I think that's a question for Jeffrey, don't you?
Maybe we'll both take a whack at it. So
This doesn't mean I have to give up chocolate, does it?
at the very core of this is an existential dilemma. That is, we are hungry for experiences that are difficult to arrange within matter. So almost everyone has the feeling that they're not getting enough. If that feeling gets too insistent, then it removes their intelligence and they start pursuing the emotion that somehow gratifies that.
It's like, or they won't ever get it again. It's like the hoarding that everybody started doing.
It's a kind of insatiability of ourselves as the Atma, as the immortal being. We taste something that tastes good, and we want more and more and more and more and more and more. So yoga is turning that toward the source of everything rather than toward the addictive substance. And in that is the very secret of yoga, that you have a little decision time between the compulsion of the addictive substance, object, whatever it may be, and gaining that same experience from something real rather than simply denying it and making it invalid. So this is the basis of the advanced levels of yoga that are called Ishvara Pranidhan, where you actually have a loving connection to a source. So it's kind of like The drugs are right there inside you. You thought they were out there, and you chase the substance out there and become someone's addict. You can see that everyone in business, unfortunately, most of them are trying to create an addiction, and we call that advertising. It's actually your favorite drug dealer trying to get control of your purse.
So Rakesh adds, does Pancha Karma fix that in any way, Laura?
Well, I would just say that, you know, from an Ayurvedic point of view, first of all, what Jeffrey said is absolutely the base, the core, the fundamentals, so important. And then we have this idea of Pratapakṣabhavana, which is in the Yoga Sutras. When we have a negative emotion or habit, then we seek not just to say bad, go away, cut it off, but rather replace it with a positive one, right? So, you know, if somebody maybe is having wine at night, maybe they like the sweetness, maybe a little sweet and sour, maybe they like that it's calming them down. So maybe we can give them some grape juice. We can add a little lemon, that's going to be some sweet, some sour, you know, and maybe some herbs that will help to cut the, you know, addictive tendencies. And then a practice of following the breath, taking 10 deep breaths just to help calm. So we look at what is the habit pattern, right? How is the energy flowing? What can we put in its place that will be positive? And then also, yeah, right? So Pancha Karma can certainly help, because Pancha Karma is going to be almost an enforced Pratapakṣabhavana. Yeah.
There's also a very important principle which is embodied in the saying, habit is our second nature. Whatever you associate with, you take on their habits or attitudes. And this is the basis of the gunas. That if you associate with the wrong thing, you take on its desires, you take on its hungers, and if those hungers are not healthy, both the association and the habit that it creates have to change. So we humans are supposed to shape our habitat and be very careful when we're around things that would give us the wrong habits, because then we'll become someone's source of income to fulfill those habits that harm us rather than improve us.
Right. I think at our essence, if I might just add this one last thing, if we think of, you know, the threefold aspect of the soul as Sat, Chit, Ananda, and then that projects into existence biologically as prana, tejas, ojas, then in a way we're all seeking an experience of ourselves as Sat, Chit, Ananda. We're all seeking an experience of our life, light, and love. You know, so what are we seeking with some of those habits that may be not positive? Underneath it, there may be a positive drive. So once we can find out what we're truly seeking, then we can nourish and feed that.
Absolutely.
Wonderful. All right, so I've turned everybody's video off. We were losing sound there. So I'm going to take questions first from Kate, then Andrea, then Alan. So Kate, do you want to go up next and ask your question? And I'll unmute you.
Hi, okay. Just a very simple question. You had, Laura, you had said a meal of kisha. What is that?
Khichdi.
Khichdi. So if Andrea wants
khichdi.
Khichdi. Khichdi is kind of an Ayurvedic staple, and it's usually basmati rice. That's the rice that is low glycemic rice, and mung, usually split mung, which is also called yellow dal. Whole mung, which is green dal, can also be used, but green has to be soaked. Whole mung has to be soaked overnight. The yellow dal just has to be rinsed. You melt some ghee, add some spices, rinse your rice and your yellow dal, put it together in a pot, add some water or some low sodium vegetable broth, and you have khichdi. That's a very basic recipe for it, but then you can add vegetables, you can add other things, sesame, cilantro, etc. And it's a full macro micronutrient meal. It's light and easy to digest. It stimulates Agni, which is the digestive fire. It's often given to people who are staying, for Pancha Karma at an Ayurvedic clinic, because it's so light and easy to digest that it won't take energy from the rest of the body that's trying to heal or detoxify. It's great for cleanse. It's also great for strengthening somebody who's weak or has a weakened digestive fire. So it's a really great staple. And it's something that I recommend people have it once, twice, 3 times a week. It helps to reset and restore not just our digestive fire, but our tongue, our palate. If our palate got used to spicy foods or salty foods or the foods that Jeffrey was referring to before, which are not really foods we should have a whole different name for, factory foods, then we can also reset the palate with some khichdi. At first it may taste bland, but once we get used to it, I consider it a whole body yum. Like the whole body is, this is delicious. You know.
Oh, you've got watering my taste buds. I'm going to make khichdi tonight.
Is that in your cookbook? I've actually ordered it, and I'm waiting for it to come in.
Thank you, Kate. It's yes. In fact, there's a khichdi recipe for every season in my book.
Yeah.
Also for people that I have a blog, food-alovestory.com, and I just recommend it because it's completely free and there's over 200 recipes there. And there's also a couple of khichdi recipes on there. And then fun things to do if you ever have leftovers.
Yes.
Or
all right,
kids who
let's
don't
move
like
on
khichdi.
to Andrea, not Andrea Goldsmith, the other Andrea. Thanks, Kate. Andrea, where are you?
Second from the top.
Oh, this one here, yeah. You are.
Hi. First, I just wanted to say thank you. I just love the way that you put everything in such an easy format to understand. I've been studying for several years, and khichdi is really an amazing thing. And sometimes I use bone broth in mine because I need to build my strength. And I know they have, I believe, also vegetarian khichdi, bone broth that is in the frozen form. That is very helpful. And I've read a lot about what to use just in case coronavirus comes up. So I just wanted to put that out there as a suggestion to everyone as well. But I just really wanted to say thank you for this presentation. It was really very good. And I was looking at your website, and you have a lot of information there. I was wondering, you had done a webinar in March, and if that's still available or if that was recorded or not.
I did 2 webinars. Yes, it is, and it's on my website. Again, just scroll down and you'll see there's a link there to that one.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, thank you, Andrea. Thank you so much.
All right, Alan Robertson, you have a question. Do you want to turn your video on?
We've been practicing Ayurveda for a number of years, and I had a Pancha Karma in the summer in India for 8 days in Kerala. And but I'm realizing now too, with the seasons, we talked Vata, Pitta, Kapha, we're entering into the Kapha season, and this virus actually seems to really manifest in the mucus in the lungs. And I have asthma, mild case of asthma, and just wondering if you had some practical tips. I know I have an Ayurvedic doctor that has given me some ideas, but transition of seasons tends to be the most difficult for people, from Vata to Kapha, and then obviously it'll be into Pitta season in the summer. But practically speaking, with the virus, I think that Ayurveda is really practical, especially knowing what we know about the virus and what it attacks to, especially in the lungs. They're saying people are not dying from coronavirus, they're dying from pneumonia, which is Kapha. So any thoughts on that?
No, I think, thank you for that. I would, on a separate conversation, we'll talk more about your experiences in Kerala and where you went. But no, thank you for that. There's a lot to say around that. The first thing that comes to mind is mind the gap. Anyone who was in London in the 80s, 90s, before the 2000s, if you ever took the tube around London, there's a gap between the tube itself and the platform. And so somebody would stand up as the tube train comes into the station. There would be a woman who would stand up, and as the doors open, she would say, mind the gap. Which I love that echoes in my mind, because Ayurveda says, mind the gap. Sandi, S-A-N-D-H-I, these seasonal gaps and these daytime gaps, and actually the gaps in the body, the joints are gaps. And Ayurveda is very aware that Vata can be exacerbated in the gaps. So vata can accumulate in the knees or the joints, and in the gaps between seasons. Also the gaps between morning and night. It's such an important time to meditate or do some pranayama, because these are the times where we need to be very mindful. We can fall in between the station and the train. So it's a good question. And in terms of the coronavirus, what we're hearing actually from allopathic doctors is what Ayurveda has said all along. In the springtime especially, sip hot water. What happens, what we say, we sort of have a more of a storytelling narrative around it, but what Ayurveda says is in the winter, you could say that we get a little frozen. Just as winter is a time of freeze, the body itself sort of freezes up. It gets tight, it gets tense, it gets cold, it gets dry. And that's a result of the combination of vata and secondary kapha. And then as it starts to warm up in the springtime, snows melt, rivers swell. So now we're waterlogged. Now we go into kapha season and there's excess water in the body. And this is true for most people. If you're in London, you're in Boston, you're in Chicago, it's usually raining more often. If you're in Colorado, the rivers are swelling. If you're down in San Diego, where I am, we have what we call May, gray, June gloom. That starts in March and goes till July. And we just haven't figured out the rhymes for the other months. So in this water season, that's kapha season, we want to make sure that mucus is important. It's not that we don't want mucus, because mucus is what grabs the bacteria and the viral viruses, and it's supposed to grab it and take it out of the body. The problem is if it grabs it and just sits there, right? So we sip hot water because that helps to melt the mucus. That helps to melt the toxins. Ama, which is toxic buildup, is said to be a sticky substance. So we want to melt that as well. So that can be removed from the tissues. But then the other thing is a nutty wash. Nutty wash is one of my favorite things. People actually kind of have come to make fun of me for my insistence on nutty, especially when traveling to cities or, when we go to India, I always have everybody practice nutty before they go. And nutty is just hot water with some salts. And then I also like to add the nutty rinse. And then afterwards, you can put a nutty nasya oil or simply ghee or sesame oil in your nose. And all of that will help to melt the mucus, to wash out whatever gets in there. Because you're right, the problem is not the virus itself. The problem is it gets in and it gets stuck. And then it feeds and it grows. So we can help the body by washing it out of the nose and washing it out of the system. And that really, hot water is the main thing for that. Hot water in the nose, hot water, sipping that throughout the day. And then the other thing is good, seasonally balanced meals, because that will help to keep the immune system strong.
Are you there, Karnamrita?
Yes.
What was your question?
Really beautiful to see all of you, first of all. And I wish somehow that we had this available once a week, just because it's so, it's inspiring and yet sattvic at the same time. It's like you said so beautifully, Laura, that it's like kapha is like love, and I feel this isolation is very vata forming for those of us that are used to being, around hugs and around, feeding off of other people and being out. So I have one question, but I thought, first of all, before I ask the question, do you mind if I sing one shloka? Just because today is Ashwini, dark moon, and also Earth Day. So I have a sweet little mantra that I want to sing. I hope the tambur is not too bad. Govinda Govinda Hare Murari, Govinda Govinda Mukunda Krishna, Govinda Govinda Ratanga Pani, Govinda Damo Dharma Diviti. Wow. Just putting a little kapha back into our
Bhakti, yeah.
I had a question that I thought I didn't understand when you were speaking, Laura, which was, you said oftentimes we can fast in order to reduce the toxins in the body, and then you also said in the next sentence, or you could put spices in your khichdi, and I thought that almost seemed like it was contraindicative to each other. And how does that work? Like one is like taking everything out, and spices is like I must be a pizza person because I like very simple food. I like a lot of burdock. Like right now in the winter, I'm eating a lot of mustard greens and keeping everything simple. And I make a lot of khichdi, but I put fresh cilantro and ghee and salt and lemon, and that's it. And everything after that. I also grew up on people who were not quite trained, and in khichdi they would put whole coriander seeds. And I don't know about you, but I don't really enjoy biting into those things.
So first of all, I really, really thank you for your beautiful voice. Thank you. So beautiful.
I was inspired by what you spoke. I chose that listening to you.
Well, thank you, because at a time in my life when everything was falling apart, Jeffrey said, you need to shift the relationship to the divine wholeheartedly, 100% all the time. And gave me a mantra very similar to that one.
Oh.
And so that's something to also remember, that while everything is relationship, and Ayurveda is always pointing to the relationship with nature, this is the true and most important relationship, right? That's so beautiful, relationship there. So
I'm going to mute you, Karen, so we're losing
fast. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh,
Laura.
beautiful on Earth Day. Thank you. So Ayurveda considers that to eat khichdi, just khichdi on a day, that's a mono fast or a mono diet. So they could call that a fast. And that's why I was probably saying that maybe too close together or too quickly. So on the one hand, somebody can skip dinner and maybe just sip vegetable broth. On the other hand, what someone can do is to just have a day of eating only khichdi or only rice and dal. And you can spice it however is best for you. And certainly for someone more pitta, we don't need a lot of spice. But you're also somebody who's grown up this way. You've grown up in the tradition, right? So your palate is more adjusted and adapted to it. You know, I have other people that I'm putting on the khichdi diet, and they're like, this is so terrible. It tastes like cardboard. So I have to spice it up for them to wean them off what they're used to eating, the pastas and the pizzas and things. So somewhere in between for people is the spectrum. And all I wanted to add to that is that when we add spice to either our food or our hot water, that can help to stimulate the digestive fire. So if we're not pitta and we don't have a great digestive fire, especially in the kapha season or the vata season, it's either one or the other, whether we're in the south or the north, then we do need to strengthen the digestive fire, because the digestive fire is the key to a strong immune system. So maybe that doesn't apply to you, but to others, ginger is a great universal spice.
Thank you, Laura. That's the khichdi without the MSG then.
All right. I'd like to thank Laura very much. Great advice. Thank you so much, Jeffrey, and adding the Vedanta perspective. Thank you so much. Next Wednesday, on the, I think it's the 20th, is Nilesh Oak. And we mentioned him earlier. Please sign up. I know a lot of you have already signed up for him, but Nilesh is a BS and MS in chemical engineering and an executive MBA. And he's interested in astronomy, archaeology, geology, genetics, quantum mechanics. And his claim to fame is his two recent books, When Did the Mahabharata War Happen? And the historic did was he took all the astronomical mentions that were to its actual date. And it's absolutely fascinating. He and Jeffrey have been friends for some time. And I'm really looking forward to the conversation and looking forward to sharing it with you. So please register early. Those of you, we prefer if you register before Tuesday at 10 o'clock. Otherwise, I can't guarantee that you'll get on to the live webinar, but everybody will get the video webinar in their streaming digital account tomorrow. So thank you everybody for being on. We'll see you very soon. And also note that the first Sunday of the month is our regular yoga philosophy class with Jeffrey. And that happens at 7:30 on Sunday night Pacific time. And there's a nominal cost of $15. I hope you will sign in for that. You will get the video as well. If you can't be there for it, sign in, register for it, and again, you will get it the next day. I'd also like to thank everybody for all the love donations that they've sent in. Andrea, thank you for doing the wonderful text. With each video talk, you do get a text account of what happens so that you have the websites and the Sanskrit words and all of the comments.
I want to thank you both so much. You are Deva and Devi. You are Divine Mother, Divine Father. You're a divine couple. You've been divine love and divine wisdom. And you have really, really, really transformed my life. And I know so many. So thank you for your vast knowledge and your even more vast hearts. Thank you.